Hello and welcome. Let us continue with our revision lecture of CA Final Direct Tax applicable for May 2020 and November 2020 exam. This lecture is the 100% English version of the lecture. We are in part 3 till now. We have finished 2 parts wherein we have covered approximately 24 chapters of your portion. We are going in the order of the textbook and continuing in the order of the textbook. Last chapter was tonnage tax scheme. Let us continue with our revision lecture. Mind you, this is a revision lecture, so we will be only revising the portion. There is not going to be detailed explanation of any chapter or any section, and as far as amendments are also concerned, I will be informing you about any amendment if at all has taken place in any chapter. Only information will be provided. The detailed explanation of amendments is separately covered in our amendment lecture. So there is a purpose of this lecture, there is a purpose of that lecture. We have to maintain the distinct identity. So continuing in our portion, next 2 chapters that we have in our index, penalties and miscellaneous provisions. Actually these 2 chapters work hand in hand. All the rules are given in miscellaneous provisions, and if you do not comply with that, the penalties are given in penalty chapter. So generally it is like rule here, penalty here, rule here, penalty here. And in both chapters one amendment has taken place. In miscellaneous provisions we had 269 SS, but we covered that in cash loan. Then there was 269 ST, and after that 269 ST, a new section 269 SU has been introduced, and for non-compliance of that a new penalty 271 DB has been introduced. So 269 SS, 271 D, 269 ST, 271 DA, 269 T, 271 E. These were existing sections. New section is 269 SU, and the penalty under 271 DB. We'll come to the amendment in a while. But before that, let us go through the penalties chapter first. Whenever you have done non-compliance of any law, you will have to pay a monetary penalty, a monetary fine. That is penalty. This chapter majorly is section crime penalty, and actually there is more of memorizing, less of any kind of revision or explanation out here. But small little explanations which are required in this chapter. First, whenever there is reasonable cause for default, there will be no penalty. However, reasonable cause facility is not available for underreporting section, search section and 271 AAC, because there cannot be any reasonable cause for concealment. Barring that, whenever there is reasonable cause for default, penalty will not be attracted any section if there was a reasonable cause. 273B. Apart from that, what is the chapter? Section crime penalty. Very first section is actually that big section which you have to learn in detail, on which you can expect sums, MCQs, anything. Section 270A. Penalty for underreporting, 50% of the underreported tax, and penalty for misreporting, 200% of the underreported tax. That means the penalty for misreporting is exactly 4 times the penalty for underreporting. Your steps of calculation are going to be: first step, calculation of underreported income; second step, calculation of underreported tax. This is going to be same for underreporting as well as misreporting. And after this second step, if you divide by 2, your answer is underreporting penalty. If you multiply by 2, your answer is misreporting penalty. In all the ICAI supplementary books, RTPs, exam questions, suggested answer, everywhere the question has calculated 50% penalty, and everywhere they have said assume there is no misreporting, because there is problem in the definition of misreporting. First of all, what is underreporting? If you have income exceeding basic exemption, you don't file ROI, underreporting. If we do assessment and your assessed income is greater than your income as per not ROI, intimation, because in intimation we correct mistakes, then there is underreporting. Every time there is reassessment, every subsequent assessment, if it increases from the previous, the income increases from the previous assessment, that is a case of underreporting. And fourth case, if you have claimed excess less loss carry forward, option 1, your amount of loss carry forward is reduced in assessment, or option 2, in fact the loss is converted into income. These are the cases which will attract underreporting. And in case of misreporting, there are some extra things, that income not shown, or expense without evidence, or investment not shown, or false entry, misrepresentation or suppression of fact, or transfer pricing transaction not reported. That will amount to misreporting, and your penalty will become 4 times, because half of underreported tax will become double of underreported tax. But when we observe the meanings, we realize that whenever it will happen, underreporting and misreporting will always happen together. If one has happened, the other will always happen, and always there will be a confusion of what to levy, 50 or 200, which is why in all suggested answer, ICAI in the question as well as answer is saying, assume there is no misreporting. At least the first two steps are going to be same. Calculation of underreported income. In the case of no ROI, it will be income minus basic exemption. This is a big area where you can go wrong. It won't be your entire assessed income, income minus basic exemption. In all other cases, it will be easy. In assessment, if your assessed income is more than income as per intimation. In subsequent assessment, if the new assessed income is greater than the previous assessment, that will work for every reassessment. And in loss cases, this is a compromise area. We have to take the difference between what you claim and what you allow. That difference. And if it converts into profit, then that big difference. That will be our underreported income. Then we will find out our underreported tax. In the first case, your actually assessed tax will only become your underreported tax because you have not filed ROI. They say calculate tax on underreported income plus basic exemption, which is same as assessed income. That is going to be your underreported tax. In the second and the third case, you have to calculate tax on both amount, assessed income tax and income as per intimation tax. You can't calculate directly on the difference. In subsequent assessments also, calculate tax on new assessed income, calculate tax on previous assessed income. The difference between that is going to be underreported tax. Only in the loss case, which is a compromise case. The loss case is a compromise case because we have no other option. The difference will be taken as underreported income and considering it as the total income. On the difference, we will be calculating tax liability on the difference between what you claim or what you have been allowed, or even if it is converted into income on the total difference. And this is going to be your underreported tax in the four cases, 50%, assuming there is no misreporting. Certain exceptions are given where penalty is not going to be attracted. They have given us certain exceptions where penalty won't be attracted only. Like if you are satisfying the assessing officer, or if it is based on an estimate and the books of accounts are correct and complete, intangible addition is what you say. In such cases, there will be no penalty because there is separate section. So certain cases there will be no penalty. Some exceptions are prescribed, you can read, but main question will come on the calculation part which I discussed. And 270AA is application for waiver. If the application gets accepted, tax is non-appealable. If it is rejected, then the rejection is non-appealable. The application is accepted only on the condition that you are not going to appeal against your tax liability, and this is not available in misreporting cases. Hereafter, the chapter is actually a straightforward system. Section crime penalty. Every crime you will have to learn the quantum. There is no revision. That maintenance of books of accounts, if you have not complied, 25,000. Tax audit, if you have not done 0.5% of turnover or 1,50,000, whichever is lower. If you don't reply to notices, 10,000 rupees penalty. Section crime penalty, you will have to learn it for answering your objective question. Just to inform you about that one amendment, for this I will have to tell you also the amendment of miscellaneous provisions chapter first. This amendment first of all has come from 1st November 19, so be very very careful. Both in miscellaneous and penalties, both sections came together. Rule in miscellaneous, and if you don't do it, then penalty under this chapter. So till 31st of October, even if there is non-compliance, there is not going to be any penalty. The section 269 SU has come from 1st November 2019. From 1st November, this rule will be coming. If your turnover last year exceeded 50 crore rupees, if your last year's turnover exceeded 50 crore rupees, then from this year, 1st November onwards, obviously from next year it will be 1st April, but in 1920, 1st November onwards, you will have to provide an additional facility to your customers. You will have to accept payments over and above the normal mode. So we are not disallowing normal modes. Cash which you are accepting, under 2 lakh you can accept. Check if your customer is giving, card facility. But if your turnover last year exceeded rupees 50 crore, then now you have to provide a facility to your customer for accepting through other prescribed modes. And recently prescribed by the ministry, they will cover RuPay debit card and they will cover UPI Bheem, because we cannot over here promote private entities. Therefore RuPay debit card and Bheem UPI is going to be promoted over here. You will have to provide the facility. We are not saying that other modes are not allowed, but this should be an additional facility provided by you to your customers. So you can accept through your ongoing modes plus provide facility. It will be the choice of the customer. When is it required? If your turnover last year was more than 50 crore in business and current year you have to start from 1st November. That's the rule given in 269 SU. Actually, I have done with you a section of miscellaneous provision. Penalty prescribed over here is simply this. If you don't provide this facility, then you will have to pay a penalty of rupees 5,000 per day. If you don't provide the facility, then you will have to pay a penalty of rupees 5,000 per day. Are we clear? That's the only amendment in penalty section 271 DB. The rest of it at the end of the textbook before questions start in the penalty chart, everything has been summarized for you. You can go through that. You will get an idea as to what it is. As far as miscellaneous provisions is concerned, there is no real or great revision of that chapter, to be very honest. They are just general rules and regulations about how to give notice, who will be given the notice, authentication of notice, authorized representative, about publishing assesses information, rounding off of income and tax. You will get receipts. You will have to just go through the sections one by one. Focus on section 286. It is important because it is related to international tax, which is talking about uniform transfer pricing documentation. If your total group turnover, gross group turnover last year exceeded 750 million euros, then this year you can go for uniform transfer pricing documentation. You can maintain master file, local file, and you can submit country by country report, and then certain rules and regulations relating to that. That was suggested by OECD in the BEPS action plan. Section 286 you have to do, and then 269 SU already revised for you. Newly amended section, newly introduced section from 1st November. These were your two chapters, penalties and miscellaneous provisions. If we move on in the order of the textbook, next chapter is a chapter called TDS. First of all, two new sections are introduced and some small amendments have taken place in certain sections. What is TDS? Whenever one person is making payment to another person, the payer is the source of income for the payee. So the payer will be deducting some tax at source. The payee need not worry, you will be getting credit of the same. TDS will come only on selected payments, only if it is taxable in India, only if it is crossing the monetary limit. Still there will be some exceptions at the rate which will be given in every section. Only in 192 and 195 the rule is full tax at applicable rates. So we will have to add surcharge and HEC. Whenever we are making payment to non-resident, in any case we have to add surcharge and HEC. The payee will be given only one duty in the chapter, that is furnish your PAN. Otherwise your minimum TDS will be 20%. Barring this, all other duties will be on the payer, that is deduct, deposit by the 7th of the next month. In case of March it will be 30th April. File your quarterly TDS return. I will tell you the general rules first, then I will revise the deduction sections. After deduction, deposit is by the 7th of the next month, but for April it will be, for March it will be 30th April. That will be monthly. Then return will be filed quarterly. So for your June quarter, 31st July, 31st after the quarter, September quarter, 31st October, December quarter, 31st January, and March quarter, because the payment is 30th April, it will happen after the payment, 31st May. And then within 15 days you will also have the due date of your issuing TDS certificate. For not paying, not deducting TDS, there will be 100% penalty. Disallowance will get attracted if you have not deducted, or if you have deducted but not deposited up to your 139(1) due date. If payee is resident, 30% disallowed. If payee is non-resident, 100% disallowed. But if the payment is made to the government in a future year, then whatever is disallowed today will be allowed in that year. That is disallowance and interest. If there is non-deduction, 1% per month or part, non-payment 1.5% per month or part, but the interest will come on the TDS amount. Interest will get attracted on the TDS amount. Non-deduction 1%, non-payment 1.5%. These are the consequences of non-payment and non-deduction. Then if you don't file your return on time, from the very first day it will be 200 rupees per day fees, but not more than the TDS amount. And if your delay crosses 1 year, then minimum 10,000, maximum 1 lakh penalty will be attracted. And for TDS certificate issue, 100 rupees per day. But practically, because the amount gets reflected in the online tax credit statement, that is form 26A, so generally it is observed that people are not insisting on TDS certificate. These are the duties attached to TDS after deduction of TDS. These are the duties attached. Also in these general points, you have the facility of 15G for selected sections. You can submit it. If you don't get covered in those sections, then you can submit another form for lower TDS. You need to submit your PAN, but if you are not accessible to tax, then we have the Kaushalya by case law also. So these are the general rules and regulations of TDS. If we talk about the sections where TDS has to be deducted, so there are quite a few sections. TDS will be deducted only if it is one of the covered sections. All these responsibilities, let us come back to the introduction. All the responsibilities are with the payer. First deduct, then deposit, then return and certificate. We have finished all the duties, only deduct is left. This deduction will take place at the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. But in 9 cases it will come at the time of payment. So till last year it was 8 cases TDS will come only at the time of payment, but this year there is a newly introduced section 194N under which again TDS will come only at the time of payment. So now that list becomes a list of 9 cases at the time of payment, and TDS will come even on personal payment, except 194C and 194J. Within this chapter TDS I also discuss a very important chapter, concept. It's a chapter also, it's a concept also. Equalization levy. What are the conditions? I'm revising very quickly. Only for non-resident. No PE in India. If you have PE, normal tax will apply. No PE in India. Specified service. Specified service will include online advertisement or digital space for online advertisement, any other notified. More than rupees 1 lakh. Provided to a resident or PE of NR, that means somebody in India, and for the purpose of business. Any one condition dissatisfied, it will not be levied. In MCQs, in fact, they tested also. A salaried employee took online advertisement service, then in that case, it is not going to be applicable. I'll revise the conditions. Non-resident, no PE, specified service, more than 1 lakh to somebody in India for the purpose of business. Then the payer has to pay 6% all inclusive, not under income tax. It's under Finance Act 2016. In fact, if that is levied, then in that case, there will be no income tax levied. And the payee has to pay that, and the payer has the responsibility of deducting that 6% all inclusive. Otherwise, all inclusive, there is no surcharge and cess on this, because this is not under income tax, this is under Finance Act. And if there is failure to deduct, then that 100% disallowance, because the payee is non-resident, will get invoked. Then if we talk about deduction sections, remember section 192 is important, 195 non-resident is important, and then 194 ACHIJ, ACHIJ are very important sections. A is about interest, C is contractor, the biggest section of the chapter. H is commission payment, I is rent, J is professional fees. These sections you will have to do in absolute detail. The remaining sections you can go through. At least every section you are required to learn the rates and the monetary limit. It is indispensable, which is why, again, for your convenience, for your facility, after the chapter, before the question answer start, a summary chart of TDS has been given so that you can revise from that very quickly. That has been reproduced for your benefit. Are we absolutely clear about that? And just to tell you about the amendments in the chapter, let's go in the amendment order. First, 194A. Monetary limit for interest section. Normally it was 10,000. If payer is bank, normally it was 5,000. If payer is bank, 10,000. If payer is bank to resident senior citizen, 50,000. The limit of 10,000 is now increased to 40,000. So normal limit 5 as it is. Senior citizen 50 as it is. Normal bank payment 10,000 limit is increased to 40,000 rupees. Bank interest limit is increased from 10,000 to 40,000. That's one small amendment. Next amendment in a section 194DA, payment by life insurance company. The existing rule was TDS will get attracted at a rate of 1% on the amount being paid. But what happens is, when you get your taxable maturity proceeds from your life insurance company, you are allowed to take certain deduction like collection charges. If any professional fees are incurred, if you've paid anything to the broker, you are allowed to take deduction. So the amount on which TDS is deducted is different from the taxable income, and therefore there is a mismatch in 26AS. So now what they are saying, TDS will not be deducted on the amount which is being paid. TDS will be deducted on the income comprised. So on that lower amount, which is your taxable income, so that the amount as per 26AS and the amount that you are showing as your income matches with each other. And because TDS is deducted on a lower amount, we are changing the rate of TDS from 1% to 5%. So rate will be increased to 5%, but on the amount of income, not the gross amount, but the net income. This amendment will be in effect from 1st September. It came in the middle of the year. Next amendment has taken place in a section 194I, that is rent section. The normal monetary limit is 1,80,000 per annum. That monetary limit of 1,80,000 per annum is hereby increased from 1,80,000 to 2,40,000 rupees per annum. The monetary limit will be increased from 1,80,000 to 2,40,000. Small amendment, very easy amendment. So two sections monetary limit is increased, and both are in ACHIJ, hot favorite section. 10,000 of interest is increased to 40,000 and 180 of rent is increased to 2,40,000. 40,000. Next amendment is in a section 194IA. Purchase of immovable property, exact 50 lakh rupees also covered. 1% on the property deal value. In this, with effect from again 1st September, like a clarification that whenever you are buying a property, along with the property price, you have to pay some incidental charges like car parking charges, club membership charges, any other general like electricity, water bill in advance, society formation charges. All those charges will also be included in this section, and for the monetary limit, and 1% TDS will be attracted if after including these charges 50 lakh rupees monetary limit is achieved. If after including these charges we are achieving the monetary limit, then all those charges are also going to be included. Are we clear about this? All of us? So that was your 194IA, and apart from that, with effect from 1st September 19 again, two new sections are introduced here. Both are introduced from the middle of the year, 194M and 194N. Two new sections from the middle of the year. Let me introduce these two sections to you one by one. 1st September 19 onwards, new section 194M. If you are making payment to contractor, commission or professional fees, one wonders these payments are already covered. But if you are not liable to deduct TDS in 194C, H or J, what may be the reason? Reason number one, you are individual HUF not covered under tax audit last year. Because you are not covered under tax audit last year, you are not liable to deduct in those sections. Remember, in ACHIJ, the payer, if individual HUF, has to be covered under tax audit last year. Or second reason, maybe if you are in 194C or J, if it is personal payment, you are not liable to deduct in 194C and J. But if you are making payment of more than rupees 50 lakhs in a year, that's a huge amount. Huge amount. It may be a personal payment. For example, payment to contractor for construction of your residential house. For example, payment to doctor for undergoing a plastic surgery. It may be a personal payment, but TDS won't come in 194C and J. And if you are an individual HUF not covered under tax audit last year, then those sections will never apply to you. If it is such a huge amount, we want 5% TDS now on these amounts also. So now any kind of professional fees, contractor fees, any kind of professional fees, contractor fees or commission by individual HUF not covered under tax audit last year, or for 194C and 194J if it is personal payment, if it is exceeding 50 lakh rupees, 5% TDS is going to get attracted in the newly introduced section 194N. And to talk about the other new section 194N, again with effect from 1st September. Cash withdrawal from your own bank account. This is TDS on payment basis. Cash withdrawal from your own bank account. Yes, you have heard it right. If you are withdrawing more than 1 crore in a year, it can be from bank account or from a cooperative bank or from a post office account. Then the bank or the cooperative bank or the post office, it can be from one account or total of multiple accounts. If you are withdrawing from one account or multiple accounts, a total of more than 1 crore in a year, then 2% TDS will get attracted on the amount after 1 crore. So first 1 crore there will be no TDS, and after 1 crore, whatever is the withdrawal, on that 2% TDS is going to get attracted. 2% TDS on the amount. So first 1 crore no TDS, after 1 crore 2%. It will be taken as total of multiple accounts. So if in one bank you have 10 accounts, we will take total. Obviously, if you have in different banks, then that database cannot be matched. So the idea is that divide in different banks. But from one bank, if you have different accounts, it will be applied on the total. First thing. Second thing, this TDS will come only on payment, because only when you are withdrawing there will be TDS. Third, a very important thing. Normally, whatever is your amount of TDS is included in your income. TDS amount is included in your income, and then you get credit. But here this is an exception to the rule. Here the TDS amount cannot be included in your income, because withdrawing your own money from your own bank account, it's a contra entry. It cannot attract any tax. There is no income arising out here. The TDS over here, there is no income arising out here. There is no income arising out here. So in that case, keeping that in mind, this income will not be included in your total income. And last, as this amendment has come from 1st September, first of all remember, till 31st August, if you withdraw crores of rupees also, there will be no TDS. The amendment came from 1st September. This is the transitional provision. From 1st September, TDS will get attracted. But the question is, the withdrawals which we have made till 31st August, will they be considered for the monetary limit purposes? Then they have released a circular stating that because 1 crore is per year, so the withdrawals up to 31st August will not attract TDS, but they will be included for monetary limit. That means if you have already crossed 1 crore up to 31st August, there may not have been any TDS because there was no section 194N at that time. But now 1 rupee also you withdraw, there will be TDS. If you withdrawn 80 lakh till 31st August, now you will get only 20 lakh rupees facility. That is what we are trying to say. Are we clear about this? All of us have understood? So that was our chapter called TDS. Again, a very big chapter. Moving on, within TDS, we have a small concept of TCS also. Part 1 is on selected goods, alcoholic liquor for human consumption, tobacco leaves, timber, other forest product, minerals and scrap. Certain rate of TCS is going to be applicable, but only on dealer sale. Consumer sale is not covered. Part B is sale of licenses, 2% in each case. Part 3 is what is important. If you are buying motor car exceeding 10 lakh rupees in any more than 1% on entire bill value will be collected, but not from sale to dealers. Only if it is sale to consumer, 1% TCS on sale of motor car is going to be collected. That part TCS is within the part chapter called TDS. We will go ahead. Next chapter is our chapter called advance tax. There are 4 installments: 15th June, September, 15th December, that's my birthday. I was born on the due date of advance tax, born to teach tax, and 15th March. 4 due days: June, September, December, March. And what are the installments? 15%, 45%, 75%, 100%. However, assessee is covered in the provisions of 44 AD or 44 ADA. Any assessee covered under 44 AD or 44 ADA, only the last installment of advance tax, that is March installment, is going to be applicable. Only last installment is going to be applicable. This advance tax is payable by every assessee, just excluding 2 people. First, a resident senior citizen not having PGBP. Mind you, the 3 conditions: you have to be resident, 60 years and above, and not having income under business. And second, any person whose final payable amount is coming up to 9999, because advance tax gets attracted only if the final payable amount is coming to 20,000 or more. Only if the final payable amount is coming to 20,000 rupees or more, then advance tax is going to get 10,000, 10,000 or more. Exact 10,000 also is liable for payment of advance tax. 9999, no need to pay. Exact 10,000 you are required to pay advance tax, except these 2 cases: resident senior citizen not having business and people having their liability up to 9999. Except 2 people, everybody else is required to pay advance tax, and failure will make you assessee in default. And if you have paid advance tax, you will get credit of the same. Are we clear about the concept of advance tax? Immediately after this, in our textbook, we have a chapter called refund. Whenever your taxes paid are more than your tax liability, you will be eligible for getting some refund, whatever is the amount extra that is going to be allowed as refund. Earlier, there were 2 ways in which you can get refund. You can file your ROI or submit an online form. Now they have changed the rule. Now refund can be taken only and only by way of filing an ROI. You will have to claim your refund except in appeal cases. If you won an appeal, you don't need to claim. Otherwise, everywhere else you will have to claim your refund. You will get interest on refund. If the interest is on TDS, TCS, advance tax, then the interest will start from 1st April of the assessment year, or in case of late return, from the date of filing. And in case of self-assessment tax, from the date of payment or filing, whichever is later. That is the date from where your interest will start till the date of granting refund. That's the period. On what principle? On the refund amount, and 0.5% per month or part of a month you will be getting your interest. And if you have claimed excess refund, you will have to return that money again with 0.5% per month or part interest. That will start from the date you took the refund till the date of assessment order. That's your chapter called refund. Whenever you are eligible for refund, whenever your taxes paid have exceeded your liability, you will be eligible for refund. Next, we have a chapter called interest under 234 ABC. 234A is whenever there is late filing of ROI, that can be under 139(1) or because of notice of reassessment or search assessment. In response to the notice, if you have filed your ROI late, then 234A interest in both these cases will be attracted on your outstanding tax amount at 1% per month or part of a month. In case of 139(1), immediately after the due date it will start, and in case of the notice case, after the expiry of notice, the next day it will start. Till which date? If you file ROI, it will stop. If you make payment also, it will stop. Supreme Court judgment, Dr. Prannoy Roy. Or third case, if your order is passed, that will be best judgment, then it will be stopped. 234A, interest of late filing of ROI. Then in this chapter we have 234B, failure to pay at least 90% advance tax. So listen, if you have paid exact 90, no interest. But if you have paid 89%, there will be interest on the entire shortfall of 11%. If you have not paid advance tax, then on the entire shortfall. So we are giving you 10% margin, error margin, but if the shortfall is more than 10%, then entire shortfall will be liable for interest at 1% starting from 1st April of assessment year till the date of payment or order, whichever is earlier. Likewise, if we catch you under reassessment or search assessment for your past tax evasions and we ask you to make tax payment on your past tax evasions, then that tax also you have to pay 1% interest from that year's first day of assessment year till the current year. And if you are making an application to Income Tax Settlement Commission also for the extra tax that we have discovered, you are required to pay interest for that extra tax also. That was your 234B. And what is 234C? Deferment of your advance tax installment. If you have not paid the installment on time, here it is very easy. Every installment you have to go and find out how much is the shortfall. So end of the year we will come to know actual liability. We will compute on the actual liability 15, 45, 75, 100, and on that respective due date how much was the payment that was made by me. So liability minus the amount paid will be the amount of shortfall. Constantly the rate of interest will be 1%. 3 months for the first installment, 3 months for the second installment, 3 months for the third installment. However, for the last installment it is going to be only 1 month interest, last month, because it is only 16 days. So if you pay on 16th June also, it is counted as September. 16th September also counted as December. 3331. Shortfall 1% 3 months. Shortfall 1% 3 months. Shortfall 1% 3 months. And shortfall 1% 1 month for the last installment. Obviously, people covered under 44 AD and ADA will have only the last calculation of interest. But here one facility is given for the first 2 installments. If instead of 15% you have paid 12%, then we will not levy any interest. And if instead of 45% you have paid 36%, we will not levy any interest. If you have paid that much, then there will be no interest. But if there is shortfall, then entire shortfall will be liable for interest. That for 234C. 234D, that is excess refund in the previous chapter. 234E, late filing of TDS return, also discussed. 200 rupees per day, but maximum equal to the TDS amount. And after 1 year, there is separate section of penalty, 271H. And let me also tell you about 234F, though we discussed this also in assessment procedure, late filing of ROI. If you miss your due date up to 31st December, it will be 5,000 rupees. After 31st December, it will be 10,000 rupees. But if your NTTI is up to rupees 5 lakh, it will be only 1,000 rupees. That is your fees under 234F. And plus, whenever you get demand notice, you have to pay within 30 days. If you get demand notice and you don't pay within a period of 30 days, then from 31st day, interest at 1% per month or part of a month is going to get attracted. From the 31st day, interest will be attracted at 1% per month or part of a month. Those were our amendments in our chapter called amendments. That was our chapter called 234 A, B, C, interest under section 234 A, B, C. Name of your next chapter is a chapter called recovery proceedings. Whenever assessee is not paying tax, how to recover? Various ways are prescribed in this chapter. AO can appoint TRO, that is one way of recovery. Other modes of recovery include approaching third parties from whom you are going to receive anything. We can approach third parties for the purpose of doing recovery of taxes from our defaulting assessees. We have the right to do that. We can take help of state government. We can take help of foreign government. Various ways are prescribed to do recovery of taxes whenever the assessee is in default. Very small chapter. You can, normal full syllabus lecture also takes about 15-20 minutes. So how much are we going to do in the revision lecture? Next chapter. A very, very important chapter, that is transfer pricing, applicable for both paper 7 as well as paper 6. Whenever you are doing transaction with associated enterprise, any transaction with an associated enterprise, that is international transaction or a specified domestic transaction, shall be done at arm's length price. and if the transaction is at any other price, then there will be increase in your income. There are certain points that you are required to note in this chapter. First, when transfer pricing increases the income of one party, the income of other party will remain unchanged. From that addition in your income, you will not get any deduction. And if applying, very important, applying transfer pricing reduces tax in India, then transfer pricing not applicable. Under transfer pricing, you are required to maintain certain data, document, information. Non-maintenance 2%, non-furnishing 2%, only place where there is 2 plus 2, 4% cumulative penalty. Only place where there is cumulative penalty. You have to furnish CA report, otherwise 1 lakh flat penalty is going to be attracted. 1 lakh flat penalty. AO has the power to appoint transfer pricing officer, and if he has appointed transfer pricing officer, then time limit to pass assessment order will be increased by 1 year. Next, there is a concept of safe harbor rules. You can show certain amount as profit margin on your operational expenses, and that amount will be accepted without asking you any question. There is also concept of advance pricing agreement. Before doing the transaction, you can do an agreement with the department as to how your arm's length price is going to be determined. Then your returns, your orders, everything will be according to the APA, and if the return and order is already passed or filed, then we will change it and make it according to the, we will make it according to the advance pricing. We will make it according to the advance pricing agreement. In this, we had a section 92 CE, which was a very stupid and ridiculous section, the section for secondary adjustment. If there is any increase in your income because of transfer pricing, there is primary adjustment, then we will also show that income in your books of accounts, that is secondary adjustment. But for this, we will have to also modify the books of accounts of our associated enterprise, and we will have to repatriate the money within the prescribed time, that is 90 days from due date of filing return, 30th November. And if we don't repatriate, notional interest will be added in your income. In one of the release circulars, they gave the calculation of notional interest. Notional interest calculation will depend on whether the amount is in Indian currency or foreign currency. If it is Indian currency, we will take SBI rate on first day of the previous year, SBI annual lending rate on first day of the previous year, and add 3.25%. But if it is a foreign currency transaction, then we will take LIBOR on 1st October of the 30th September of the previous year, and 6-month LIBOR will be taken, and we will be adding 3%. That is the prescribed notional interest. But this was ridiculous because the associated enterprise will never agree to pass the entry. There is no question of repatriation of that money. It was out of question. So now they have introduced an option. If you don't want to pass the secondary adjustment or repatriate the money, on that amount pay a one-time tax 18% plus compulsory surcharge 12% plus 4% HEC. Pay this one-time tax, then you don't need to do any secondary adjustment. For all practical purposes, this is only going to be the option. Just the government wanted tax twice. How twice? They have increased in your income, so primary adjustment, and now by not doing secondary adjustment, they are taking from you one-time tax. So government is getting this 18% extra on your income again. Just to do that, they have introduced this only and only for this purpose they have introduced. So 2 years ago they introduced the section, they realized it is not possible, and now they are giving you the option of secondary adjustment not to be made and just pay this one-time tax. Then here only we discussed about the concept of notified jurisdictional area. Whenever there is not adequate exchange of information, we will declare that as notified jurisdictional area. Any income that you earn, it will be taxable even if it is a loan taken. Any expense that you incur in NJA will be disallowed except if there is permission to question. Minimum TDS is going to be 30%, and only one country was declared, that is also removed. And here also we discussed 94B, again introduced because of BEPS action plan on the suggestion of OECD. Limit on interest deduction, maximum 30% of your EBITDA. If you are paying interest to your non-resident associated enterprise, maximum interest deduction will be 30% of your earning before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization. Maximum 30%. But only if the amount is exceeding 1 crore. Provision not applicable for banking and insurance industry. Only if the amount is more than 1 crore, not applicable for banking and insurance. And after 30%, if any amount is disallowed also, that can be carried forward and adjusted within the section limit up to a period of 8 years. These are general points of transfer pricing chapter. Then as we are aware, the three meanings, associated enterprise, specified domestic and international transaction, are a total waste of time. You need to focus on the methods. Most important, most logical, most sensible method, the CUP method, that is comparable uncontrolled price method. Then obviously the other methods, resale price, cost plus profit split, transactional net margin. As and when you are moving away from CUP, you are also moving away from logic. You are making compromises. This is our chapter called transfer pricing, a very, very important chapter. With this, we have reached that stage of our life where we have finished our chapters from volume 1 and volume 2, that is the final CA portion, and now we will go to the revision of the IPCC topics in the order of heads of income. Let me talk about income from salary. It may not be relevant for you, but remember, from your employer you receive anything, whether it is salary, allowance or perquisite, everything is going to be taxable. In case of allowances, you have to calculate the amount exempt from the amount received, and in case of perquisite, you have to find out the taxable value. This chapter is majorly confined about learning the exemptions under allowances and the valuation under perquisite, and apart from that, there are some deductions. One thing, that is only one amendment that has taken place in this chapter, one small amendment that has taken place, that the standard deduction which was introduced last year at 40,000 rupees. Standard deduction in salary last year was introduced at 40,000 rupees, will now be increased from 40,000 to 50,000. One small amendment but far reaching impact. Otherwise, entertainment allowance and professional tax will continue as it is. Just 1 or 2 questions if you practice, that much is going to be enough. Likewise, house property also, you never expect a question on this, but it can come as an adjustment in a big question. If they say computed income from house property, then the entire amount will go in your outer column, but if they use the word rent received, then you have to give 30% standard deduction. Let me tell you that what is this chapter, that annual value is going to be taxable. How to compute annual value? Municipal valuation, fair rent, whichever is higher will become expected rent. Compare with standard rent, whichever is lower will become annual letting value. Compare with actual rent. If you satisfy conditions, then rent received, otherwise rent receivable. And actual rent or ALV, whichever is higher will become GAV. If there is any vacancy period, SOP period will not be included in vacancy. Vacancy period, then in that case add that vacancy period in your actual rent for comparison purposes, but GAV will be between actual rent and ALV. GAV minus municipal taxes, only if paid and paid by the landlord will give you NAV. 30% of your NAV will be your standard deduction, and interest on borrowed capital due basis, whether paid or unpaid, only for purchase, construction, repair, renewal, reconstruction. Any sixth purpose is not going to be allowed. If outside India, then you have to deduct TDS. Then subject to these 2 deductions, you will get your income from house property. However, if your house property is self-occupied property, and the biggest change that I have seen in my, one of the biggest changes that I have seen in my career, now you can take 2 houses as SOP, and after 2 houses, DLOP provisions will get attracted. So whatever house you have given on rent, even for 1 day, that will be in LOP. The remaining were in SOP, but you can take maximum 1, other will become deemed to be let out. But now in SOP you can take 2, and after 2 houses, a big amendment that has taken place, after 2 houses it will be DLOP. And even if the house property is in stock in trade, the second amendment that has taken place in this chapter, stock in trade will also suffer DLOP. The time limit was 1 year from the end of the year of CC, but now the time limit is changed to 2 years. So both places 1 has become 2. 1 SOP has become 2 SOP, and 1 year time limit on stock in trade has become 2 years. 2 years from the end of the year of CC, the DLOP provisions will be attracted on LOP. The DLOP will be attracted on stock in trade also. Apart from that, if there is any recovery of unrealized or arrears of rent, then the recovery will be taxable subject to a 30% standard deduction again, and pre-construction interest deduction will be available in 5 installments. 5 installments deduction will be available. That is the short revision of our chapter income from house property. We are almost towards the end of our revision lecture. Obviously, PGBP capital gain, some important chapters are left, but this now we will complete in the last and the final part of the revision lecture. Video number 4 will be your last and the final part of your revision lecture. We will continue in that video, video number 4. Thank you very much.